Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the moment you pull away from an avoidant person, they suddenly start paying attention? Maybe they act like they don't care, but deep down something shifts. You feel it. And guess what? You're not crazy. They feel something. Today I'm going to break down exactly what avoidants secretly think when you disappear, and trust me, it's not what they want you to believe. When you disappear from an avoidant person's life, something interesting happens. At first, they might act like it doesn't bother them. They may even tell themselves, good, I needed space anyway. But here's the reality they notice. Hard. See, avoidants thrive on emotional distance. They've built their entire identity around self-sufficiency, convincing themselves that deep emotional attachment is a threat to their independence. So when they push people away, they expect those people to fight back, to chase, to prove their worth. That's the cycle they're comfortable with. But the moment you break that pattern by truly stepping back, you force them into unfamiliar territory. And that's when things get interesting. At first, they may rationalize your absence. They might think they probably just need time, or this is good, it means I don't have to explain myself. They might even feel relieved, but that relief is shallow, because as the hours turn into days and the days into weeks, a new thought starts creeping in. Wait, where did they go? It doesn't hit all at once. It starts subtly. Maybe they scroll past your name and their messages and realize you haven't texted. Maybe they notice your absence in their daily routine. Suddenly that silence they thought they wanted. It feels different. It's no longer freedom, it's emptiness. And avoidants, despite what they tell themselves, are not immune to feeling. They've just spent their whole lives trying to suppress it. This is the moment where the mind games begin. They may not reach out, but they'll start to check. Maybe they'll scroll through your social media to see if you're active. Maybe they'll bring you up in conversation with mutual friends, just casually, just to see if there's any mention of you missing them. They'll never admit they care, but their behavior tells the truth. Because here's the thing, avoidants want to believe they have control. They want to believe they can walk away and feel nothing. But when someone they care about disappears without a fight, it does something to them. It forces them to wonder, did I make a mistake? They expect people to protest, to plead, to prove their love. But when you don't, when you just go silent, that's when the power shifts. They start to question their own feelings, and avoidants hate feeling uncertain. They hate feeling like someone else has the upper hand. So in their mind, they start running through scenarios. What have they done with me? Have they moved on? Were they never as invested as I thought? And that right there is the moment they start to realize they might not have been as detached as they believed. Because if they truly didn't care, they wouldn't be thinking about you at all, but they are. And that realization alone is enough to shake them. When you disappear, an avoidant might initially convince themselves that it doesn't matter. They've spent years perfecting the art of detachment after all. But as time passes, a thought creeps in, are they moving on? At first, they try to push it away. They remind themselves why distance is good, why they needed space, why emotional entanglements are exhausting. But the longer they go without hearing from you, the more that thought lingers. Avoidants are used to having control, and part of that control comes from knowing that people are always there, always waiting, always available. But when you remove yourself from that equation, the certainty they relied on vanishes. They start to wonder if you're thinking about them at all. If you're out there meeting new people, smiling at your phone, having deep conversations with someone else. The idea of you moving on starts as a small whisper in their mind, but quickly grows louder. And here's the thing, avoidants don't like admitting they care, even to themselves. So instead of acknowledging their feelings, they mask them with logic. Of course, they would move on. That's what people do. That's why I don't get attached. But the moment they think that there's an unease they can't shake. Because if they truly didn't care, why does the thought bother them? They might start checking your social media, looking for signs. They won't double tap your post or leave a comment, but they'll notice. They'll analyze your photos, the people in them, the places you go. If they see you looking happy, it stings in a way they weren't prepared for. And if they see even the slightest hint that you might be seeing someone else, that's when the panic starts to set in. The irony is, avoidants run from closeness because they fear losing themselves in a relationship. But when they realize they might be losing you, a different fear takes over, the fear of being left behind. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. They were supposed to be the one in control, the one choosing distance, the one who didn't need anyone. But now they're the one wondering. The worst part for them is the lack of certainty. They don't know if you're waiting or if you've truly moved on. They don't know if you miss them or if you've replaced them. And avoidants, despite their outward confidence, hate not knowing. It makes them restless. It makes them question themselves. And in those quiet moments when they let their guard down, they might even regret pushing you away. They won't rush to tell you this. In fact, they may fight against reaching out just to prove a point to themselves. But deep down, the fear is there. The longer you stay away, the more they wonder if they just lost something they weren't ready to let go of. When an avoidant realizes you've disappeared, their first instinct isn't to chase, it's to rationalize. They tell themselves they don't care, that it's probably for the best, that they needed space anyway. But as time passes, a battle begins inside their mind. They start thinking about you more often than they expected. They catch themselves wondering what you're doing, who you're with, whether you've even thought about them at all. That's when the urge to reach out creeps in. At first, they dismiss it. They remind themselves that they prefer independence, that relationships are complicated, that emotional closeness is exhausting. But the thought doesn't go away. Instead, it lingers, resurfacing at unexpected moments when they scroll through their phone, when they pass a place that reminds them of you, when they hear a song that brings back a memory. They debate whether they should send a message. A simple "hey" wouldn't hurt, right? But no, immediately their defenses go up. Reaching out would make them look weak. It would mean admitting that your absence has affected them. And avoidants hate feeling like they're losing control. So they push the thought aside. They tell themselves that if you really cared, you would reach out first. That if you haven't, it means you've moved on and they shouldn't waste their time. But no matter how many times they try to logic their way out of it, the question lingers, why haven't they texted me? This thought irritates them more than they'd like to admit. They're used to people chasing them, trying to get their attention, proving their devotion. But this time it's different. You're not playing the game. They start looking for signs, checking your last online status, seeing if you've liked their recent posts, maybe even asking about you in a casual, offhand way. Anything to reassure themselves that you're still there, still thinking about them, still waiting. But if they find nothing, if you've gone completely silent, that's when the real discomfort begins. Their mind plays tricks on them. One moment they convince themselves they don't care, the next they catch themselves staring at their phone, debating whether to type a message. They might even go as far as writing something out only to delete it before hitting send. Their pride won't let them give in so easily. This back and forth can last days, weeks, even months. They keep waiting for you to break first, to give them the reassurance they secretly crave. But the longer you stay away, the more conflicted they become. Their emotions, which they've spent so long suppressing, start to bubble up in ways they can't ignore. They don't want to admit it, but something has shifted. And whether they like it or not, they're starting to realize that your absence is affecting them far more than they ever expected. When you disappear from an avoidance life, they expect to feel nothing. That's how they've trained themselves to detach, to stay in control, to avoid the emotional weight that comes with deep connection. At first, they might even feel relieved. There's no pressure, no expectations, no need to navigate the complex emotions that come with relationships. They tell themselves this is how it was supposed to be, but as time passes, something shifts. A strange feeling creeps in, one they don't quite recognize at first. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it grows stronger the longer the silence stretches. They start to feel uneasy, not necessarily because they miss you, at least that's what they tell themselves, but because something is off. The pattern they expected is broken. They assumed you reach out, that you try to fix things, that you'd be the one to make an effort. But when you don't, that's when the discomfort really sets in. For an avoidant, emotional connection has always been something to manage, something to control. They've spent years reinforcing the idea that they don't need anyone, that they're perfectly fine on their own. But your silence disrupts that belief. They may not even realize it at first, but a slow and unfamiliar feeling begins to take hold. Discomfort. It's not the kind of longing that others might experience when they miss someone. It's different. It's a nagging thought in the back of their mind, a sense of unfinished business, a restlessness that they can't quite place. They begin to analyze their own emotions in a way they don't usually do. Why am I even thinking about this? Why does it bother me that they haven't reached out? They may try to rationalize it away, telling themselves that it's just habit, that they aren't actually affected. But no matter how many times they try to push it aside, the thought returns. Then comes the real confusion. They start replaying past interactions, questioning whether they misjudged their own feelings. So that they actually care more than they thought. Did they assume they didn't need you? Only to realize now that they feel something missing. These are questions they don't want to ask themselves, but the silence forces them to. They don't have the usual distractions of conversation, the back and forth validation, or the reassurance that you're still there. They only have their thoughts. And avoidants, despite their outward confidence, struggle when left alone with emotions they don't fully understand. At this point, they might begin testing the waters. They may check your social media just to see if you've posted anything that hints at how you're feeling. They might casually mention your name in conversation with mutual friends, hoping to get an update without having to reach out themselves. Some may even craft a message to you only to delete it before sending, unwilling to admit that they want to reconnect. The inner struggle becomes exhausting, but their pride often wins. The longer this continues, the more undeniable their feelings become. They realize that they expected you to chase them, to prove your importance in their life, but you didn't. And that leaves them with only one conclusion: if they still feel this way despite all their attempts to suppress it, maybe you meant more to them than they ever allowed themselves to believe. When an avoidant realizes that you have truly disappeared, their initial reaction isn't panic, it's control. They tell themselves that they expected this, that relationships always end this way, that people always leave. They convince themselves they are better off, that they are simply returning to their natural state of independence. But beneath the surface, something else is happening. A different kind of thought begins to take shape, one they don't want to acknowledge. I need to reassert control. Avoidants hate feeling powerless. Their entire defense mechanism is built around maintaining control over their emotions, their attachments, and the people in their lives. When they push someone away, they expect that person to linger, to wait, to try to come back. That's how they stay in control, by keeping others at a distance while still knowing they have the option to reconnect if they ever choose to. But when you disappear without resistance, when you don't chase or beg, they lose that sense of power. And that's when the discomfort sets in. At first, they try to ignore it. They tell themselves it's just ego, that they don't actually care about your absence, that they are just used to having you around. But as time goes on, they start to notice small shifts in their behavior. Maybe they check their phone more often than usual, scanning for a message from you, even though they swear they don't want one. And maybe they scroll through old conversations, replaying the last few interactions in their mind, wondering if they missed something. They start questioning their assumptions. Did they really care so little that they could just leave? That thought alone is frustrating. Avoidants are used to people proving themselves, proving their love, proving their worth. But when you don't do that, when you remain distant, you break the cycle they rely on. And that's when the need to reassert control takes over. They might start small, testing the waters. Maybe they post something on social media that they know you'll see, something designed to make you wonder if they moved on effortlessly. Maybe they mention you in a casual conversation with a mutual friend, hoping the information gets back to you. Some will go a step further, sending a vague text, liking an old photo, anything to gauge your reaction. They won't directly say they miss you or that they want you back, but their actions reveal the internal battle they are fighting. The irony is that even as they try to reassert control, they are actually revealing just how much they feel its absence. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need to play these games, but the fact that they are trying to provoke a reaction means that they are unsettled by your silence. And the longer you remain distant, the more they realize that their usual strategies aren't working. This can lead them to either retreat further into avoidance or finally face the truth they've been avoiding all along, that losing you wasn't part of their plan. When enough time passes and an avoidant realizes you're truly gone, a deeper realization sets in, one they've been trying to avoid. At first, they convinced themselves that space was good, that they needed it, that relationships are too complicated and suffocating anyway. But now, in the silence, they start to feel something unfamiliar: regret. Not the overwhelming, heart-wrenching kind that forces an immediate reaction, but a slow, creeping sensation that something isn't quite right. They begin to wonder if they misjudged the situation. If they assumed you would always be there, always waiting, always willing to try again. They start thinking back to the moments they dismissed, the times they convinced them they didn't care, the times they chose distance over connection. And for the first time, they begin to ask themselves whether they made a mistake. Avoidants don't like to admit fault, not to others, and certainly not to themselves. They thrive on the belief that they are in control, that their choices are logical, that emotional entanglements only lead to disappointment. But when you remain silent, when you don't reach out, when you don't fight to stay in their life, you challenge that belief. And that's when the internal conflict becomes unbearable. They tell themselves they're fine, that they don't need closure, that they don't need to hear from you. But the more they try to convince themselves, the more they feel the weight of what they've lost. They may start seeing reminders of you everywhere: a song, a sentence, a phrase someone says in passing. They catch themselves reminiscing about the small things, the inside jokes, the little moments they thought meant nothing at the time, but now feel significant. So they start to realize that even though they pushed you away, they never fully let you go in their mind. Then comes the toughest part, the moment they acknowledge that you weren't the problem. That their own fears, their own walls, their own reluctance to be vulnerable played a bigger role than they wanted to admit. They start to recognize the pattern, how they've done this before, how every time someone gets too close, they find a way to sabotage it. But this time is different. This time, the person they pushed away didn't come back. And that forces them to sit with an uncomfortable truth. Avoidance didn't protect them from pain, it created it. Some avoidants will still resist reaching out, afraid of looking weak, afraid of reopening emotions they worked so hard to suppress. Others will find themselves at a crossroads, wondering if they should break their own cycle and admit they care. Either way, the impact is the same. Your silence has forced them to confront something they've spent a lifetime avoiding, the reality that pushing people away doesn't mean they won't feel their absence. And in that moment, whether they act on it or not, they finally understand that letting someone go doesn't always mean freedom. Sometimes it means loss. When you disappear from an avoidance life, they may initially feel relieved, convincing themselves that space was what they needed all along. They pride themselves on their ability to detach, to remain unaffected, to control their emotions rather than be controlled by them. But as the silence stretches, something begins to shift. They find themselves thinking about you in moments they didn't expect, wondering why you haven't reached out, questioning why they even care. The certainty once had about their decision starts to waver, and without realizing it, they begin searching for signs of you, anything to confirm that you are still there, still thinking about them, still waiting. But when they find nothing, that's when the unease truly sets in. Avoidants operate under the assumption that people will always return, that no one ever really leaves unless they push them away hard enough. But when you walk away on your own terms, when you don't chase, beg, or plead for their attention, you introduce them to something they're not used to: uncertainty. They hate not knowing, and even more, they hate the idea that you can move on without them. They start questioning their choices, replaying past conversations, analyzing their own emotions in ways they never have before. They might not reach out immediately, still clinging to their pride, but inside they are no longer as sure of themselves as they once were. The battle between logic and emotion becomes overwhelming. They tell themselves they made the right decision, that they were protecting themselves from the messiness of intimacy, that it's better this way. But their actions betray them. They check for updates about you. They wonder who you're with. They feel a sting when they see you happy without them. And then comes the worst realization of all: maybe they weren't as unaffected as they thought. Maybe their avoidance wasn't a sign of strength, but a defense mechanism against something they were too afraid to face. For some, this leads to a moment of reckoning where they finally understand that avoidance doesn't shield them from pain, it only delays it. They begin to see how their patterns have kept them trapped in a cycle of loneliness, how their need for control has only pushed away the very people who truly cared. But understanding isn't always enough. Many avoidants will still resist taking action, still hesitate to reach out, still struggle with the vulnerability that true connection requires. And so they remain stuck, torn between the desire to reconnect and the fear of what that means. Ultimately, your disappearance forces them to confront the truth they've spent a lifetime running from. Whether they admit it or not, whether they act on it or let the moment slip away, they now know something they can't unlearn. Distance doesn't erase emotion. Avoidance doesn't guarantee freedom. And sometimes the real loss isn't the absence of another person, it's the realization that they were the ones who let something valuable slip through their fingers. Thank you for taking the time to listen and reflect on these insights. Understanding the complexities of avoidant behavior isn't just about knowing what they think, it's about recognizing the power of your own actions, your own boundaries, and your own worth. Sometimes walking away isn't about making someone miss you, it's about choosing yourself, your peace, and your emotional well-being. If there's one thing to take away from this, it's that silence speaks volumes. When you stop chasing, when you stop proving your value to someone who struggles to see it, you shift the dynamic entirely. And whether they realize it today, tomorrow, or years down the line, your absence will leave an impact greater than your presence ever could. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here, for growing, and for challenging yourselves to understand relationships on a deeper level. Life is a journey of learning, evolving, and standing firm in your truth. Never underestimate the power of your own strength and resilience. With that, I want to wish you all the best on your personal journey, whether that means reconnecting with someone or walking away for good. Whatever you choose it with confidence. Choose it with self-respect. And choose it knowing that you are enough with or without the validation of another. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for showing up for yourself. Stay strong, stay true to who you are, and until next time, take care and goodbye.